Hey everyone! Today we're diving into another terrifying case. Please support my channel by hitting that subscribe button and turning on the notifications. Often the most dangerous manipulators are very eloquent and convincing. They are easily able to put the victim's vigilance to sleep, intimidate and completely subordinate it to their will. Relationships with such a person can carry a serious threat to both mental and physical health. As a rule, the manipulator is looking for a victim full of life, ambition, and energy of a person, so that in his network often fall even the most intelligent, strong, and independent who simply break, becoming obedient and uncomplaining puppets. Australian stalker from Tinder, as he was nicknamed in the press, hunting for young, successful beauties, which he first conquered with his charisma, intelligence, and appearance, and then turned their lives into a real nightmare. The man's name was Paul Lambert, and he was incredibly attractive, intelligent, seductive, and equally insane. He stalked his victims with manic persistence, tortured, intimidated, maimed, and prepared to kill. The only thing that stopped him was a bullet fired to kill. Early years of Paul Lambert's life. Paul Lambert, née Scales, was born in 1980 on the 10th of August in Brisbane, the largest city and capital of the state of Queensland, Australia. He was the youngest of two children in the family of Margaret and Oliver Scales, and was raised with his older sister, Dorothy. When the boy was not yet 5 years old, his parents divorced. His father left the family and practically stopped communicating with the heirs, although he helped his former wife financially. Soon the man remarried, and in his new marriage he had 2 more children, after which he began to visit Paul and Dorothy, only to congratulate him on his birthday or Christmas, and sometimes called them. The boy missed his father very much, and was very resentful of him for leaving and, as he thought, falling out of love with him and his sister. Already in junior high school, Paul began to have serious problems with behavior and discipline. He became almost uncontrollable, and could not control him neither mother nor teachers. The child behaved aggressively towards other children, did not recognize any authority, was impulsive, irritable, and his mood was constantly changing. Concerned, Margaret decided to show her son to a specialist and turned for help to a child psychologist, who diagnosed the boy with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. However, the doctor at that time did not see it as anything terrible, concluding that the problem arose against the background of divorce of parents, and with time, will pass by itself. Allegedly, Paul experienced his father's departure too painfully, which resulted in behavioral problems and difficulties with concentration. A psychologist at the time didn't prescribe any medication for the child, believing he would soon outgrow his neurological behavioral disorder. However, as time passed, the situation only worsened. By the age of 10, the boy became uncontrollable, displaying aggression and unpredictability. His mother decided to seek help again, this time consulting a psychiatrist, who not only diagnosed him with ADHD, but also identified several other mental health issues, including bipolar disorder and clear signs of dissociative identity disorder, DID. Commonly known as multiple personality disorder, this condition means the patient's identity is fragmented, leading to the impression that multiple distinct personalities exist within one individual. The boy was prescribed receptor medications, which he was supposed to take under his mother's strict supervision. However, getting him to comply was nearly impossible. He actively avoided taking his medication, convinced he was healthy and had no issues. Nonetheless, while Paul was a child, managing him was easier. Margaret insisted on treatment that seemed to help, and for several years, the problem was forgotten. Paul's mental health struggles did not affect his intelligence or academic abilities. He excelled in school, becoming the top student. He had a knack for the sciences, easily performing complex calculations in his head, and his teachers believed he would succeed in a scientific career. After graduating, he effortlessly enrolled in a prestigious Australian university, earning a master's degree in economics and finance. Upon graduation, he secured a position at the headquarters of a major company in Sydney, quickly rising to lead the finance department. In terms of relationships, Paul had a striking appearance from a young age, and it only became more captivating over time. with masculine features, large expressive eyes, and a strong physique. He made a great first impression. He had many admirers in school, eager to catch his attention. Paul was sociable, easily making friends and often being the life of the party. His mental health issues produced an interesting side effect: a powerful charisma. Everyone considered him a good guy, reliable and respected by his colleagues. When a child of one of his co-workers was diagnosed with cancer, he personally initiated a fundraising effort, providing significant support to the family. As mentioned earlier, Paul was good at making friends and easily started relationships with girls, but they were always short-lived. Before long, he would reveal his true nature, scaring his partners away. His romances typically lasted only a few months, after which he would turn their lives into a nightmare, stalking them, threatening them, lying, manipulating their emotions, and instilling fear. This was just the tip of the iceberg. Notably, he always chose very attractive girls who matched his own model-like appearance. Paul had several favorite methods for manipulating his victims to keep them close. He was highly articulate and persuasive, constantly playing on their sympathy by fabricating terminal illnesses for himself and his loved ones, which made the girls feel guilty for leaving their sick boyfriend. Only his mother and sister truly understood what Paul was really like. While he was a child or a teenager, he was difficult but manageable. His mother insisted on therapy, but as an adult, he completely rejected treatment and psychiatric visits. He achieved his goals through blackmail and threats, with the most effective method being the threat of suicide. Between 2002 and 2016, 6 restraining orders were issued against Paul, forbidding him from contacting or approaching 6 different girlfriends from that period. He stalked each victim for an extended time, poisoning their lives and driving them to the brink of madness. For one of them, he even emigrated to another continent, but was deported and banned from entering the country after she reported him to the police. But let's go through this step by step. First love. While attending university, Paul met a girl named Samantha. They began a romantic relationship, but it didn't last long. He tried to control her every move, manipulating her, pressuring her, stalking her, and completely stripping her of the ability to make her own decisions. It all came to an end after graduation when Samantha stayed in Queensland while Paul, driven by career ambitions, moved to Sydney. Despite the turmoil in their relationship, they continued to stay in touch after their breakup. At the start of their romance, they were both young, and for each of them, it was their first love. Perhaps that's why Samantha hesitated to completely sever their ties. The former couple occasionally called each other, exchanged messages, and interacted on social media. Samantha had no idea about Paul's new relationships. He regularly texted her, saying he missed her, couldn't forget her, and hadn't met anyone better. This was, of course, a manipulation. But despite her previous experiences with him, Samantha believed he had changed for the better over the years apart, and that he truly loved her. Attempt to start a family. In January 2014, nearly 10 years after their breakup, the couple rekindled their relationship. Just a month later, Paul proposed, and Samantha happily accepted. They got married on March 2nd of that year. However, the new husband's behavior became troubling just a few weeks into their marriage. Paul began losing control, unable to manage his emotions, and even the smallest things could set him off. He constantly exerted emotional pressure on Samantha, trying to dominate her will. When that didn't work, he resorted to physical violence. When Samantha attempted to leave her tyrant husband, he promised to see a specialist and undergo treatment. She believed him, but it turned out to be just another manipulation tactic. 6 months after their wedding, when tensions reached a breaking point, Samantha brought up the idea of divorce again. This time, Paul promised once more to seek help, but she no longer trusted him. He then suggested they take a trip together to sort out their feelings and think things over. Surprisingly, this idea seemed like a possible solution to Samantha, and she agreed to start planning the trip. In late September 2014, the couple traveled to the other side of the world, to the United States. Paul insisted on visiting Florida, a place he had long wanted to see. Although Samantha preferred Hawaii, She caved under the pressure from her manipulative husband, who always got his way. They renewed their wedding vows on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. However, despite the romantic setting, the event and the trip could not save their marriage. Hunting in Florida. After returning to Australia, Paul insisted they move to Florida, where he had enjoyed his time. Samantha was adamantly against it. She had no intention of relocating to another country or continuing their relationship. Samantha insisted on a divorce, but Paul had no intention of granting it. During this time, he became obsessed with the idea of moving to the U.S., pushing everything else aside. He simply abandoned Samantha, quit his well-paying job, packed his things, and flew to Florida. The girl continued to seek an official divorce, but her husband ignored her efforts. Thanks to his solid savings from years at a big company, Paul was able to indulge himself after relocating to a new country. He rented a spacious apartment in a nice area, regularly hit the gym, bought expensive trendy clothes, and carefully maintained his appearance. Wherever he went, he drew the attention of women, but he was on the hunt for something special: the unfinished divorce. Paul created profiles on several dating sites, showcasing his best photos. Almost immediately, numerous women began messaging him, admiring his looks, and eager to get to know him better. However, he took his time responding until he stumbled upon the profile of Brittany Ann Kill. This 32-year-old blonde was a local news anchor with a truly Hollywood appearance. Brittany caught Paul's attention right away, and he was the first to message her, suggesting they meet up. Without hesitation, she agreed, and they set a date just a day later. Paul charmed her with his charisma, eloquence, and good looks. He didn't just shower her with compliments. He took Brittany to one of the city's best restaurants. Paul made an unforgettable impression on her, so much so that she found herself falling for him on their first date. Brittany thought he was the man of her dreams, possessing all the best qualities, and she excitedly shared this with her best friend. However, Paul viewed her as a prized trophy, something he needed to boost his own ego. This woman was incredibly beautiful, a popular TV personality, and had immense career potential. Paul didn't want to lose her, so he made up some important business to justify flying back to Australia to finalize his divorce. He planned to return to the States right after and propose to Brittany. Samantha was taken aback by Paul's sudden visit, and even more shocked by his frantic desire to end their marriage, especially since he had previously refused to grant her a divorce. Nevertheless, by early 2015, without an official dissolution of their marriage, Paul flew back to Florida, unable to endure the separation from his new obsession. More accurately, he couldn't bear leaving her without his watchful eye. When Brittany accidentally discovered the real reason Paul had gone to Australia, she was shocked and even considered breaking up with him, feeling guilty for the collapse of his marriage. However, Paul managed to convince her that he and his wife had long since separated and that they had mutually decided to end their marriage. He just needed to settle some formalities. Upon his return, Paul immediately went to see Brittany, spinning a sob story about his unhappy first marriage and his search for true love. His words sounded so sincere that just a week later, the couple moved in together. However, Brittany laid down some ground rules, agreeing to give Paul a sort of trial period of 3 months. She believed that during this time they could see if they were truly compatible. Beauty and the Beast. After moving in, it took Paul just a month to reveal his true self and turn Brittany's life into a nightmare. He began to see her as his possession, believing he had the right to dictate her actions and completely control her life. His behavior became erratic, and his actions were unpredictable. It seemed he was battling multiple conflicting personalities within himself, which he couldn't control. Brittany quickly realized that something was seriously wrong with her new partner and tried to end the relationship. For Paul, this was a call to action. He started blaming her, claiming that he had divorced his wife and flown halfway around the world for her. He insisted he had sacrificed everything for her, and she was now destroying his life. He pushed for them to stick to their original plan of living together for at least 3 months, but Brittany packed her things and moved out to another apartment. Trying to escape her unstable boyfriend by moving didn't work. Paul began stalking Brittany, not leaving her alone for a moment. He sent her hundreds of messages daily, called from different numbers, emailed her, and literally followed her everywhere. The tone of his messages fluctuated between love declarations and pleas for forgiveness to threats of self-harm or harm against her. A couple of weeks later, Paul changed tactics. He called Brittany, his voice trembling, and told her that his father had died and he had no one to talk to in the U.S. Brittany's heart softened. She couldn't imagine anyone lying about something so serious. Being kind-hearted and empathetic, she agreed to meet her ex-boyfriend, genuinely wanting to support him, believing he needed to talk and vent. So, playing on her sympathy and manipulating her feelings, Paul managed to maintain a connection with Brittany for a while, making it seem like they were back together. However, he couldn't keep himself together. He became aggressive again, acting erratically and frightening her. When Brittany attempted to break up with him once more, he declared that he wouldn't survive another shock and threatened to harm himself. Brittany was frankly afraid of her inadequate boyfriend, but didn't know how to get rid of him. She gently suggested that he seek help from a psychiatrist, to which Paul replied that psychotherapy and medication will not help him because he was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor, which is growing and is the cause of his breakdowns as well as strange behavior. The pathological liar cried, claiming he was going to die soon, and made the girlfriend promise that she wouldn't leave him while he was alive. The next month and a half turned out to be the most terrible in the life of the popular TV host, because Paul did not give her peace neither at home nor at work. The girl stopped sleeping normally, became anxious, distracted. She had panic attacks, which negatively affected her work and threatened to turn into a complete collapse of her career. Restraining order and deportation. Unable to cope, Brittany simply ran away from Scales, staying with a friend where she thought he wouldn't bother her. But the man changed tactics and began to threaten the girl with the publication of her candid photos, as well as an intimate video, which he filmed without her knowledge. This was the last straw, and the victim finally went to the police, which she also reported to her stalker. In July 2015, the court issued an order prohibiting the stalker from approaching the girl or having any contact with her in any way. But despite this, Paul continued to stalk his victim, writing her threats, blackmailing her, following her. In October of the same year, the man was finally deported from the country, banning him from entering the United States, and Kill was able to breathe a sigh of relief. Back in Australia, Scales, first of all, changed his name to Lambert, his mother's maiden name, so that no one would know about his problems with the law, and then he decided to return his ex-wife, with whom he never had time to divorce. Samantha was horrified to learn of Paul's return and went to the police to ask them to protect her and speed up the process of dissolution of the marriage. First, attempted murder. In February 2016, Paul called his wife and told her that he agreed to give her a divorce, and after convincing her to go to a lawyer together to settle some nuances. Samantha, despite the fact that she knew this dangerous man well, believed him, and was already anticipating how she would receive the long-awaited certificate of divorce. The man picked up the girl in his car, and at first everything went normally. But as soon as they drove away from her house, he first began to beg to give up the divorce and live together again, and, having received a confident refusal, began to insult Samantha and threatened that he would smash the car so that they died together. Paul accelerated the car to a huge speed and almost flew under the truck, moving on the oncoming lane. The girl managed to twist the steering wheel and they drove off the road. Then the man began to beat his wife, but she managed to run out of the cabin and began to call for help. After the incident, Samantha went to court, accusing Paul of kidnapping, bodily harm, and attempted murder. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 10 months in prison, as well as promptly dissolved the marriage and forbidden to approach his ex-wife. Surprisingly, just a month later, the man was released on parole with a probationary period of 1 year. Once free, Paul went to another state, rented a house there, and got a job, but did not notify the authorities. However, every time, In order to check in with the inspector, he flew to the same place, so that no one guessed anything. By the way, Lambert was obliged to visit a psychiatrist, who found him to have much deeper problems than previously thought. He was prescribed medication, which he, of course, did not take. After attending the number of sessions prescribed by the court, the man refused the specialist's help. A new victim. Almost immediately after his release, Paul started a new profile on a dating site, where he soon noticed 28-year-old Angela J., who fascinated him with her attractive, one could say, angelic appearance. It was his type, a graceful, blue-eyed blonde with a dazzling smile and an impeccable figure. The girl worked as a doctor and not so long ago went through a difficult divorce, so she was looking for support and understanding and found a man who almost took her life. However, everything began beautifully and romantically. Paul again turned on all his charm so that the new victim fell into his net. He showered Angela with compliments, took her on dates, seemed attentive, understanding, and sympathetic. After about a month, Lambert's behavior began to change rapidly. He became more and more obsessive and literally followed the girl. Secretly, he made a duplicate key to her house and would come there while Jay was at work. When she guessed about his visits, she decided to break off the relationship, and then, as you can guess, the worst began. Paul first begged her to forgive him and give him another chance. Then he threatened to take his own life, and when he realized it wasn't working, he started threatening Angela. Eventually, he asked her for help as a doctor, and she couldn't refuse. The girl promised that she would help him find a good specialist, and she herself would monitor the course of treatment, which the man seemed quite satisfied. Lambert behaved more and more inadequately and threateningly. He stole Jay's documents and refused to give them back to her, insisting that she go with him. But the girl realized how dangerous it was, and therefore did not make a mistake. She managed to call her sister, who called the police. Paul returned the documents but was given a warning, and then was simply released. Cut him up and tried to burn him alive. That same day, straight from the police station, Paul went to a hardware store where he bought a large kitchen knife, a roll of duct tape, and lighter fluid. Then he rented an inconspicuous car and drove to Angela's house, but he couldn't get in because the girl had changed the locks. He waited for her return from work, lurking near the front door. The girl saw her stalker at the last moment, managed to run into the house, close herself, and called the police. The law enforcers who arrived failed to apprehend Paul because he had escaped by that time. However, he returned a week later, on November 3rd, taking with him a crowbar, which he used to open the back door, and broke into Jay's home while she was at work. When the unsuspecting girl returned, she had barely had time to cross the threshold before she felt a stabbing pain in her shoulder. Angela tried to run, but Paul knocked her down and began stabbing her indiscriminately all over her body. She received more than a dozen stab wounds in the chest and neck area. Her arms were shredded, but the girl continued to fight for her life. Suddenly, the man took out a bottle of lighter fluid and doused the victim, and then took a lighter, which fortunately turned out to be faulty. All the while, Jay continued to scream and call for help. Her desperate cries were overheard by a neighbor who was passing by the house, and he bravely rushed to the rescue, armed with the first stick he could find. He managed to scare off the attacker, who ran away. The man immediately called an ambulance and clamped the bleeding wounds of the girl until the arrival of the medics. Shot like a rabid animal. Despite extensive injuries and heavy blood loss, the victim was saved. Surprisingly, Paul continued to write and call on Angela's phone, even when she was taken to the hospital. He apologized, blamed everything on his alter ego, and promised to get even. The man sent similar messages to his mother, as well as his ex-wife and Jay's parents. On November 4, Lambert called the police and spent several minutes talking about the personalities living inside him, accusing them of all the atrocities. To offers to surrender, he replied that he would rather die, and hung up. However, the police managed to trace the call, and they went on the trail of the criminal. Paul was caught the next morning on a highway off the east coast of Australia and ordered to stop, but he tried to get away from the patrol cars at breakneck speed. Spikes were placed on the road, thanks to which the fugitive's car was stopped. However, Lambert was not going to give up and jumped out, waving a huge knife. To all entreaties to surrender, the man again replied that he would rather die. He behaved aggressively and inadequately, ready to attack the officers who already had him in their sights. At one point, Paul swung a knife and ran at one of the police officers, who was forced to shoot, but one bullet did not stop the intruder. Then several more shots rang out, after which Lambert fell to the pavement and did not move again. Only death could stop the madman. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. There are a lot of shocking stories coming up.